down to is all these people are purchasing loans and mortgages that they cannot pay back. This problem dates back to the 90s when Clinton passed legislation to deregulate banks, and when organizations, for example, Acorn, were pressuring banks to hand out low-interest loans to people that should not have been able to get them in the first place. And so there's a matter of personal responsibility here. It's not all about oversight and transparency.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question for you guys to find it out, because what you guys have been dealing with is how much government is necessary, how much regulation is necessary, and where. But just a quick mention of the loans by people who couldn't really afford it was about 3% of this whole mess. For those who aren't interested, $1 was leveraged into $64 by computer programs that have gotten us in the position we are in. Some of humans weren't even in charge, just let the programs run the whole thing. Okay, so what is enough government? Where is good regulation? What's bad regulation? Where is it good referees that throw a flag where referees shouldn't throw the flag? I'm sure you all have different opinions. Let you guys go first on that.
All right. I think when it comes down to it, I mean, you do have to have some sort of regulation within the system, especially when you're dealing with these large, when the government has such a hand in it. I mean, with these huge mortgage companies like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, and what it basically comes down to is, the government not overstepping and trying to control it too much. And I think that's happened too much recently. But the government has knee-jerk reaction to bail out these businesses and bail out these companies the second that people start losing money on them. I think that's the wrong reaction. There's a lot of, right when this started, there were a lot of small businesses that started giving out bad loans, or that they started defaulting, people started defaulting on the loans, and businesses couldn't handle it. I think a lot of these businesses should have just gone under. There's bigger businesses that could have picked those up, bought them out, and it would have gone on as normal. I mean, it's bad business practices on these parts of these businesses, as well as the government, and I think that, when it comes down to it, we kind of have to let it work, let some of these companies fail, and not just want to keep propping them up all the time. I mean, businesses are going to be responsible to get the profits when they succeed, but at the same time, they're going to have to face the losses when they don't succeed and they make their own choices.
Okay.
Sure. Government is by nature big. Michael Fine is a politics professor here and says there's 85,000 different forms of government that we all are part of in some form. So government by nature is going to be big. It's just what hands you have and everything. The bailout that had to happen was because large companies, the largest investors in the country, the largest insurance companies who are never supposed to fail, failed. It wasn't small businesses that failed. Small businesses are struggling as is. They weren't failing. They were just trying to get by and pay their mortgage and pay their electric bill. But by bailing out these big companies, we stopped them from falling. If the big companies fail, our student loans can't be paid. If the big businesses fail, we can't pay our insurance off, so all of a sudden healthcare is not a possibility. These big businesses, if they had failed and the government had not stepped in, despite the fact that they did not want to, but had to, the economy would have failed further. Just look at what the stock market has done. We've had record ups and downs in the last 2 weeks. That's not related to this, I don't know what is, because the stock market brokers are by nature finicky and somewhat scared. So by the fact that they were letting go of some of theirs and the next day buying and selling, it's a dangerous idea, but it's what they did. What would have been perhaps a good idea was what we did after September 11th, which was shut the stock market down for a few days so that people wouldn't buy and sell. Because the same thing would have happened after September 11th because there was massive chaos. We didn't know what was going to happen, so massive sales and buying would have happened. But because we didn't stop the stock market, this bailout had to occur.
The original question was, what is good regulation? The original question was, what is good regulation? What government intervention should we take? Now, of course, I agree that we cannot have no regulation. There must be some government in our economy and some government in our daily lives to keep this flowing. But regulation is not always the answer. For example, the deregulation of the airline industry in the 1970s, adjusted for inflation, the overall prices have dropped by 9% due to the deregulation. So not all deregulation is bad. We can see that in this instance, it might not have worked for the financial industry. However, I do think that the bailout right now will eventually go down through Main Street, so I think it is a good idea.
This is where we differ. I fundamentally disagree with what he just said.
That's why you're independent.
Basically, this, as I said, breaks down to just a lack of oversight. I mean, government has to stay in proportion to the economic, social infrastructure that we have built. I have a problem with the right in saying that they're all for small government, but yet they always want high regulation for morals. We'll go to that later, but very situationally, they like to use the government for their favor. We'll get to that later, as I said, but it has to keep in proportion with the economic, social infrastructure that we've had. They want to keep government the same size as it was in the 1700s. That's not practical. That's not logical.
Interesting. Okay, we're going to move on to something that's also part of the debate. Obviously, we can't go around making the Saudis happy forever. Can't all drive Hummers anymore. We have an energy crisis. I don't know if the word is crisis. We have an energy challenge. And tied to this energy challenge is also the issue of dealing with this energy challenge and the reality of the greenhouse effect or global warming, whether it's caused by man, whether it's caused by natural cycles, or whether it's caused by aliens who don't like us. It doesn't matter right now. It's happening. So we'll start off this time with the Democrat. What about this energy challenge and its relationship to the environment?
I think it's something we've been dealing with since the 1970s when President Jimmy Carter was in, and while sometimes he's forgotten or labeled as one of the worst presidents of all time, he actually realized that energy policy was something we had to deal with then. However, we haven't done anything in the last 30 some odd years, which is unfortunate. To deal with the energy independence issue, it's going to have to be a combination of a lot of solutions. We can't just go drill, we can't just go to coal, we can't just go to wind, we have to go to all of them. Because we're a 300 million person country. One solution isn't going to solve this giant problem. A combination of all of them will. And it comes back to everything. It comes back to the idea of in higher education. We push this idea. We want our engineers to work on looking at different types of electrical power and that type of thing. It comes back to actually working with the auto industry and forcing them to have higher EPA standards, that you have to get 40 miles to the gallon to even be on the road. And you have to force them to look into alternative fuel sources and the idea of having a hybrid electric car that is required for people to have. Now, while people sometimes complain that we're just going to try to find one problem and it'll solve everything, it can't happen. It's going to take a multitude of things to actually solve the energy independence issue. Continuing to work with OPEC and other large oil companies and conglomerates seems like the only option we have, but it's really not. If Americans can do just about anything, it's that we're ingenuitive and that we can come up with new ideas. So I'm pretty sure that we can solve this problem. It's just going to come from a lot of different perspectives. We've just got to be open to embracing that and actually supporting those ideas.
Okay.
I definitely agree a lot with what Jake said. I think when you look at the energy issue, we do have to start breaking away from this huge oil dependency that we do have, especially with OPEC. I mean, this huge cartel that doesn't adjust to the market and it doesn't actually work like any sort of other entity that produces oil does. The biggest thing that we can do to break off from OPEC, especially just dealing with oil itself, is to start drilling more here in the United States. I mean, whether it be off-coast drilling or up in Anwar. I mean, everybody says, oh, Anwar is this pristine place, you have to protect it. I mean, let's picture this for a second. You've got a football field, there's a post-it note on that football field. That's the size of Anwar compared to Alaska. And that's the amount that we'd be drilling in. It's a small area, this barren landscape that we'd be drilling in, and it could really help us out just to break off a little bit from that oil. Even if it's just a little bit, it's helping us break our dependency and our funding of countries like Iran and Venezuela, the places that we support with our oil profits. Right now, the biggest thing is not just working with oil, but all these other technologies that we do have, such as wind, hydrofuel, and especially nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is something that is not brought up enough, and a lot of Democrats tend to just shut it down and say, no, we don't want nuclear. When you look at it, I mean, how many times have you heard of a nuclear catastrophe that's happening in Europe recently? I mean, you haven't heard of it. But the fact is that France has been running about 87.5% of its energy through nuclear energy right now. All this electricity comes from nuclear, and it's safe, and these European countries have found ways to use it, and we have to take that technology and use it in the United States here. And I mean, putting all these options on the table to reduce our dependence on foreign energy and foreign oil is the most important thing. And Jake also mentioned about cars and bringing out more fuel-efficient cars. You see that right now without any sort of government mandates for gas mileage or whatever. You have hybrid cars that are coming out as gas prices stay high. People are buying them because they realize they're more efficient. We don't have to have government mandates saying every car has to have 40 miles per gallon because that's going to jack up the prices. If people can afford them, they'll buy them, but if not, we'll have to look for other energy sources.
Well, that's great to hear that.